Hello, everyone. Much has been written about how big data could be used to solve a range of business challenges and how it can provide a greater depth of insight. But to date, not much has been written about how these insights can be extracted. This is my inspiration for this paper. It's a very practical paper, and it's aimed at those that want to understand or use big data, but have limited practical experience of doing so. My aim is to give an overview of what I think big data actually is, and how it differs from the market research data we handle on a day-to-day basis. Perhaps most importantly, however, it will outline why, as market research professionals, we already have many of the tools and techniques required to derive insights from big data. In short, we should not be scared, and I personally think that big data is the biggest opportunity for our industry right now. So in terms of the agenda, what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the characteristics of big data. I'm going to talk about how quickly the data universe, or the big data universe, is expanding. I'm going to talk about some of the things that we found helpful in driving successful analytics. And then I'm going to look to the future and focus on 4 key trends in the marketplace. Finally, I'm going to talk about conclusions and implications for the market research industry. At this point, I also need to introduce our picture theme. When we brainstormed this paper in the office, we felt that big data was a bit like an ocean. It's mysterious and vast, and it contains a rich, valuable, and interesting treasures. But you sometimes have to look hard to find them. I hope you enjoy the images, and I warn you now, some of them are more interesting than others. Okay, looking at the characteristics of big data. When I Googled big data, this is one of the first things I found. It's a word cloud of some of the terms that are commonly associated with big data. The first thing to note is that many of these terms will be familiar to anybody working in the market research industry. Data, analysis, mobile, query, storage, and processing. These are all terms we use on a daily basis. And it's a very important point to make at the start of the presentation, because fundamentally big data, although it often requires different software to analyze it, is just another source of information that can be analyzed to extract insights. Having said that, big data does have some very different characteristics to market research data, as many of you who've already interrogated it will understand. For me, there are 4 key characteristics of big data, and thinking about each of these now in turn. Starting with volume. Firstly, I need to dispel a myth. Not all big data is big. While it's true that many big data sources require terabytes of storage space on a daily basis, there are a number of sources that do not require anywhere near this amount of storage space. I like to say to clients that a lot of the work we do in market research is actually in the area of medium data. What do I mean by this? Well, frequently we analyze market research alongside customer data, and we typically deal in hundreds or even thousands of records rather than millions and billions. But despite this, market research is part of the big data universe. Velocity. Velocity is important. In a rapidly moving world, many big data sources are characterized by the speed at which they are moving. A sales database for a global retail brand would be an example of a very fast-moving database. This could include information about every individual who purchased each and every product provided by that brand globally in real time. Variety. Variety is actually one of the biggest challenges associated with the analysis of big data. Because many big data sources are unstructured, the range of potential data formats is vast. One of the first phases of being to interrogate big data is being able to classify and understand all the variables in a data set. This is the equivalent of building a data map. The time associated with exploring data in order to understand it will frequently be the largest component of analytical time, particularly where the data is in a raw or unstructured format. And value. The final characteristic, and perhaps the most important characteristic of big data, is value. Firstly, it's important to note that not all big data has value. And for this reason, one of the first skills that any data analyst has to learn when interrogating big data is to quickly identify which data points are important And we'll come back to this point throughout the presentation. Finally, it's also worth noting that big data does not need to have all of these characteristics, but it does need to have at least one of them. Because of advances in technology, we're now able to deal with 3 of the 4 characteristics of big data relatively easily. We can deal with volume, velocity, and variety. This means that the key area for development and focus is in the area of analysis, an analysis to provide value. Only by employing analytical techniques effectively will we be able to extract all the valuable insights that are found within big data sets. And this is an art form. As we shall see later, many of the techniques that we use in market research can be successfully employed to analyze big data, which is why the market research industry is perfectly poised to embrace the opportunity that big data presents to us. Okay, now focusing on the rapidly expanding big data universe. There are 3 main sources of big data. The first is structured data, and this will be very familiar to most people in the room. In market research, we spend a lot of time designing studies that collect data in a very regimented and precise manner so that we can derive the insights that our clients demand at the end of the project. We think a lot about technical design, question wording, and order. And we expect the insights to fall out at the back because we've been clever and thoughtful throughout the process. Overall, it's a very, very structured process. Examples of other data sets that follow similar principles are CRM or EFM databases and third-party market databases. All of these data sources have a rigid structure as a foundation. However, the majority of big data is not structured. It's chaotic, random, disparate, and has no foundation. Yet by volume, it's significantly wider, deeper, and richer than market research data. The challenge is extracting the insights from data in that format. Unstructured data itself takes 2 main formats. Human-generated data is content provided by consumers across a variety of sources and includes areas such as customer feedback, social media, photos, video, and audio. By definition, these data sources all require different analytical techniques or different analytical techniques to be used in market research. I'm sure many of you will have analysed social media data, which is becoming a very important part of market research industry, particularly because of its ability to generate unprompted sentiment analysis. But the data source that is growing the quickest is machine-generated unstructured data. This is growing exponentially in volume terms and is therefore the most interesting to many companies. Examples of this type of data include weblogs, transactional information, call records, Wi-Fi, and geolocation. This data shows changes in social media consumption between 2010 and 2013 in the UK. There are 2 points to take from this slide. Firstly, the level of interaction with social media has continued to grow quickly over this period. 41% of the UK population in 2010, up to half of the population in 2013, accessed social media. The second point, and perhaps the most important point, is that growth in social media usage via new devices remains very strong. By Q1 2013, 27% of adults were interacting with social media using a smartphone, and 11% were using a tablet. In particular, it's the growth in smartphone usage that is likely to be the most important from a big data perspective. Mobile phones provide us with large volumes of data that enable us to understand more about consumer behaviour, as well as the ability to join together voice, SMS, mobile internet, apps, and NFC transactions. So what does unstructured data actually look like? Here are some example outputs. Please note this is not real data. As you can see, unstructured machine data is non-standard, diverse, dynamic, and very high volume. Importantly, it's typically time-stamped, so it's also a time series. This data shows 4 stages of a journey a customer went through when purchasing a new product. Each line of the data relates to one customer interaction. Line 1, the order processing, is the purchase itself. Line 2, the middleware error, shows that the product actually fails when the consumer uses it. Line 3, the care IVR, is where the customer calls the call center because of a product failure. And line 4, which is Twitter, is where the customer tweets about their poor experience. I think it's worth noting that all these events and all this information can be captured in real time via the machine data generated by the different systems supporting each interaction. These underlying systems generate millions of data events daily. Here we see just single line items from just some of them. Okay, now moving on to analytics and the key to successful analytics. Okay, a story. A story of two tennis players, one very famous, one less so. On the left, Andre Agassi, who was arguably the most talented tennis player of his generation. He won 8 Grand Slam titles between 1992 and 2003. He was number 1 in the world for 101 weeks. On the right, Brad Gilbert, a hard-working tennis player who had limited ability compared to Agassi, but applied himself to reach number 4 in the world before turning to coaching. Wikipedia quite accurately describes Brad Gilbert as a player who did not have a major offensive weapon, such as an overpowering serve or forehand. His best asset was his ability to keep the ball in play. Brad Gilbert wrote a book called Winning Ugly, which talked about how tennis players can make the most of their talents. In 1994, Brad Gilbert became Andre Agassi's coach. At that point, Agassi had only won 1 Grand Slam, but was recognized as the most natural talent in the game. Experts felt he was underachieving. His main problem that he always tried to play the perfect shot and make winners, rather than waiting for the right opportunity to attack his opponents. Brad Gilbert recognized this. He coached Agassi to grind out more points and become less obsessed by hitting the perfect shot. Agassi won 6 Grand Slam titles with Brad Gilbert as his coach, and Agassi described him as the greatest coach of all time. And I believe it's this principle of winning ugly that holds the key to unlocking the value contained in big data. Following on from what Andrew said earlier, this is a case study that relates to social listening. This case study actually pulls together a range of data that we collected a couple of years ago now in 2011. The work itself was undertaken by Ipsos for R&D purposes and was not client commissioned, so I can show it to you today. It relates to the banking market in the UK. From our tracking data, we were able to establish that Santander's customer satisfaction scores in the UK had fallen behind its competitors. The company had just acquired 3 local brands, Abbey, Alliance & Leicester, and Bradford & Bingley. It had market-leading products, but was underperforming because of its service reputation. To better understand the impact of its poor customer experience, we analysed 3 months' worth of social media data. From this, we were able to establish specific issues that were causing customers to react negatively to the brand. This word cloud summarises what customers are saying about Santander online. The most prominent words, call centre, complaints, customer service, not working, and problem, give a flavour of some of the issues that were being talked about. As we'll see in the next few slides, while some of the experiences that customers were getting would have been picked up by customer experience tracking and market research, we would not have been able to identify a number of themes without being able to interrogate social media data alongside it. Okay, coming back to Brad Gilbert and the ugly part. The ugly part of our analysis in this case was actually preparing the data. We undertook a lot of data preparation. We firstly interrogated all the data sources we had access to in order to build up a complete picture of everything that was impacting on customer experience. We then built a query that enabled us to capture all relevant comments about Santander on social media in a single database. Following this, we used text analytics to identify the most common themes that were being talked about online. We also classified each individual comment by theme. Finally, we built a second tier of sub-themes for more granular classification of comments. And by working through this process, we were able to quantify the frequency with which topics were being discussed online, i.e. that give their relative importance. These data show the top tier output month on month throughout the period of analysis. You can see there was a big spike in activity during July, caused by a relatively high volume of comments relating to customer experience. One of the reasons for this spike was the announcement by Santander that it was going to move its call centres back to the UK. This caused a lot of activity on Twitter. But it did not explain all of the increase in customer service comments. In general, we find that issues related to customer experience are more likely to appear on Twitter than any other form of social media. This is because of the immediacy of Twitter compared to other social media sites. What actually happened was that an increase in poor customer experience with Santander drove an increase in Twitter activity. And this is shown in the bar on the left, which shows that 56% of all comments about Santander in that month appeared on Twitter compared to 30% in forum and just 10% on blogs. So it's very much driven by the customer experience. The 30% forum figure is also worth noting because forums are sites on which category influentials gather to talk about topics of interest in the sector. Many of the comments about Santander at this time were actually really positive, partly due to the call centre move back to the UK, but also because their product range is very competitive. Unfortunately for Santander, any positive sentiment that was created was drowned out by its customer experience issues. The list of sub-themes on the right-hand side show the most common customer experience topics that are being discussed online. These have been color-coded. So red is positive sentiment, green is positive sentiment, red is negative sentiment. And because we can quantify the frequency of mentions, these topics have also been ranked, with operational issues the most commonly mentioned issue. And it's worth noting that of the top 5 mentions, only the call centre move from India was a positive story. By looking at the actual verbatim comments that related to these most important issues, we were then able to identify specific improvements in Santander's customer experience. And these were the initiatives we came up with. They were presented in the form of a recommendation, but each one backed up with a relevant verbatim comment. If there's one slide that we wanted Santander to embrace and understand, it was this one, as it not only summarized the findings of our social listening, but it also gave an indication of how other data sources could be integrated to tell a more complete story in the future. As well as the insights themselves, 3 immediate data priorities also emerged from this exercise. Firstly, Santander would benefit from a greater understanding of the product transfer customer journey. And ongoing monitoring of customers going through this process, especially at the pain points we identified, should be included in tracking. Secondly, an analysis of any internal data issues mentioned by customers could be used to identify the range of problems associated with the migration of legacy data into the Santander CRM system, which was causing real problems with customers at this point. And thirdly, social media sentiment tracking should be analysed alongside brand and customer experience tracking programs to provide a more complete picture of customers' views. And overall, we felt that a more integrated data framework would provide deeper and richer insights for the brand. Okay, looking to the future. And 4 key trends that are isolated for the big data industry and how they're going to impact on us as market researchers. Key trend 1. With the big data world moving so quickly, looking to the future is actually very difficult. In fact, the 4 trends that I'm going to talk about today in this section are already happening to a greater or lesser degree. And the world is changing as we speak. The first key trend is the availability of increasingly sophisticated data aggregation software. This is important as this development will help ensure that we do not end up drowning in data. It is now possible to match individual level data across a number of data sources. And by doing this, we're able to understand consumer behavior in n dimensions rather than the 1 or 2 dimensions that we're used to working with. Why is this important? Well, if you could analyze multiple data sources at the individual level, the richness of insight that can be generated grows significantly. Many companies are already at the point where their internal data is regarded as a very important asset. Transactional data, CRM and EFM databases are being used to mine and extract insights that have a dramatic impact on customer experience, company strategy, and therefore profitability. However, it is now possible to mine these structured data sources alongside unstructured data sources to pull together a previously incompatible range of data. To emphasize this, let's go back to the big data output I showed you earlier. I've added explanations on this slide to some of the data points to show that it is now possible to connect events from a number of sources at the individual level. This shows how unique identifiers can be used to link key activities and events in the customer relationship to tell the story, what we were talking about earlier in terms of what's important in the future. This customer has just bought a new product. In the first line, there's an order ID, a customer ID, and a product ID. And by tracking the movement of these three key pieces of information using unstructured data, we can build up a picture of what actually happened to this person. In line 2, we can see which technical fault they experienced. In line 3, we can see that this negative customer experience was compounded by the fact they were kept on hold for 4 minutes at the call center. And in line 4, their overall experience caused them to rant on Twitter. Just bought this POS device from Acme, doesn't work. Called up, give up on waiting for the answer. RT if you have Acme. This gives a clear example of how you can build up a picture of activity, behavior, and experience. And you can now do all this in real time, which means that activities that previously took a while to identify and understand can be diagnosed and potentially prevented in real time. Big data provides the opportunity, therefore, to respond much more quickly to events that matter to customers than we ever had before. Okay, key trend 2. With so much data now being generated, especially unstructured machine data, it's becoming impossible to store everything that's produced. This means that in the future, companies are going to have to think more carefully about which data sources are valuable and therefore need to be stored, and which can be discarded. This process is called filtering, and it will become increasingly used to ensure that all valuable data is available for interrogation. Once the valuable data has been identified, the next challenge is setting up a means by which it be used in analysis, and this is called tagging. It's now possible to tag data using software in real time, so analysis can be conducted as soon as data is read into software. This is an important innovation, as it enables us to conduct analysis on the fly as soon as data has been generated. Key trend 3. Any company that owns a big data source which has value is now looking to monetize their assets. Monetization can take 2 main forms. Firstly, analysis of the data with the aim of improving business performance, so standard analytics. The example of poor customer experience we highlighted earlier is one of many examples of how big data can be mined to improve business outcomes. Arguably, in this example, it was not the malfunction of the product that was the trigger to a customer tweeting about their bad experience, but it was their inability to speak to a member of staff in the call center. By being able to diagnose instances of poor customer experience, as well as their causes, companies will be able to reduce churn and decrease the number of brand detractors. The second way of monetizing big data sources is by realizing the value of data collected by selling it in the marketplace. The data collected in the course of companies' everyday activities sometimes has an intrinsic value. For example, any comparison website has customer journey information that can be mined to understand more about how consumers make decisions. Most companies will have transactional information from their own customers, but this is only part of the picture. Finally, and I think most importantly, the focus in the big data space will be very soon on how analytics can be used to unlock the latent value that's held in big data sets. We are just starting to understand the potential of big data. And while it has been the focus of much hype over the last few years, this is very much an industry in its infancy. Hopefully my presentation today has highlighted the opportunity that is presented by big data. With the recent advances in software, I firmly believe that big data offers the market research industry a significant opportunity to exploit its analytical capabilities. In a market that is contracting in value terms and where margins are ever tightening, it's one of the few areas that's likely to grow significantly in the short term. Okay, to sum up by giving some conclusions and implications for the market research industry. Three main conclusions from what I've been talking about today. Firstly, I hope you now understand that market research is actually part of the big data universe. And I think as researchers, we need to acknowledge this and actually behave accordingly. Big data for us is an opportunity. And I think we all realize this. We have the analytical experience to embrace this area of rich opportunity. And I think we need to act now. Secondly, we must partner with a range of data owners and software suppliers. The world is now ready and able to work in n dimensions. The key to success, I believe, is partnering with complementary suppliers to optimize the opportunity. In the UK, we are increasingly working with companies who own big data, who have large market databases. We are also forging relationships with software suppliers in the EFM and big data spaces. These types of collaboration will become more commonplace in the future. And thirdly, we must acknowledge the data we analyze will not always be in a neat and structured format. We will need to invest time in understanding the data that we're working with. And if you take one thing from this presentation, please do not be afraid of investing time in data analytics, as this is the key to optimizing big data. For many of us in market research, this is the polar opposite of what we do today, which is typically focused on the process of generating data in a structured format. In the world of big data, nothing is perfect and creativity is king. A new breed of analyst will emerge who's prepared to invest time and effort getting familiar with unstructured data sources. And the most successful of these will be prepared to win ugly. So don't forget the wise words of Brad Gilbert. Thank you.